We are now joined by SABC News political editor Mzwandile Mbeje and our international editor Sophie Mokoena and political analyst Professor Seepe. They join us in studio with the Mzwai in the Union Buildings.
And we'll start with you, Mzwandile. Let's go to the Union Buildings now. And I want to ask you then, Mzwai, about the options available to the president tonight as we wait for him to speak. What action can he take to do with the SAPS impasse?
Well, a very good evening to you, Thembekile and Bali, there in studio. Indeed, the president has certain options in his hands after those allegations. One of those options is to set up a judicial commission of inquiry. Remember, these allegations are quite serious. They need to be investigated thoroughly so that the public can obviously have confidence in the justice system, because they go to the core of our national security. So that is basically one of the options I think the president has. And I guess what he also may do in the process may perhaps decide to set up some sort of a committee or a task team to look into these. But I think that which will have, I guess, powers to subpoena, so will probably be the most, I think, ideal in these circumstances. Maybe the other thing that he can do, he can ask the people involved so that no one is seen as interfering with the process, perhaps to take leave of absence, or as the president, he can decide perhaps to relieve them of their duties altogether. But I don't think that would be the route, given that this process must be fair. And I think knowing the president, he's a man who does want to follow processes. Yes, the public may have their own views in terms of what needs to happen, but I guess the president will be very much aware that he is the head of state. He needs to do things the right way and ventilate these issues perhaps into the public so that the public is able to then understand what exactly is happening. So my own suspicion is that some sort of an inquiry is what the president is going to perhaps look at, because at the end of the day, South Africans would want him to do something about these allegations.
And just on that note, then, Mzwandile, we're beginning to get a sense, haven't we, at least from some of the newspaper reporting, of what may have come out of the president's meetings with the implicated parties, if we can call them that. One report today suggesting that, in fact, Police Minister Senzo Mchunu has given some indication that he would not be reluctant to step aside or take a leave of absence.
Oh, yes. Given the seriousness of the allegations and the portfolio that he is occupying at the moment, and I think he realizes that for the public to be able to have trust in the system, and perhaps for his own sake, he realizes that it must not be seen that perhaps if there is some sort of investigation going on, he is interfering. So I think he realized that perhaps that would be the good step to then step aside if the president so wishes, so to allow the process really to run freely without any perceived interference from anyone. The question is, if he, for example, asks to be put on leave, so what happens to other people who are somehow implicated? Because this process would have to interact with just about everyone. And I suspect, Thembekile, that it's not going to be confined to what we know already. This is likely to go beyond these allegations that we have seen, because South Africans, I guess, would want to actually get to the bottom of what led to this, because at some point the country was quite shocked that on a Sunday morning a police commissioner comes up and deals with these issues. So clearly there is something that the country needs to understand and needs to know, and the president will have to take the lead in taking South Africans into confidence about what actually should be done.
Certainly, and Sophie, looking at what Mzwandile Mbeje has just said, there is a lot weighing on the president's shoulders in terms of this address we are expecting from him tonight. And just last week, when we saw that press briefing by General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, you were in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil with the president. And maybe just take us through, when it comes to the South African delegation, what was the mood like when we heard these revelations coming out from Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi? But before you tell us more about the president's reaction and as well as the South African delegation who was there, let's take a listen to this clip that you interviewed the president and he responded to you.
Were you aware that he was going to do that? But secondly, South Africans are saying action now, not tomorrow.
I was not aware of it, that it was coming. And obviously it is a matter that I will be dealing with when I get home. I will need to look at it more closely and have a thoroughgoing discussion with a number of people. And thereafter, there will be a clear way forward. This is not a matter that we should not give attention to. It is a serious matter. It has to do with the security of our people, but it also has to do with our adherence to the rule of law. The police play a critical role in enhancing the rule of law, the safety of South Africans, and that those who have done wrong should be dealt with, and should be dealt with thoroughly in terms of our constitution and our laws. So this matter is going to be addressed.
And Sophie, just listening to that statement from the president saying that he was not aware. This is a serious response coming out from the president.
Well, clearly the president was not aware that there was going to be this presser. But I think he was aware that there were problems within the police service, because we've since heard that reports were put before relevant people in terms of these complaints. And not only this one, even those who are complaining, there are complaints against them. And therefore, there were problems in the police service, and this matter was doing the rounds within the relevant people. And the president, as the chair of the security cluster, I think the Security Council of the country, I think in terms of the intelligence services, either the Criminal Intelligence Service or the Military Intelligence Service, he will be aware when you have serious issues that borders on the security of the country. And you spoke about how was the body language or the reaction from the South African delegation. Of course, they were sleeping because the time difference, it's 5 hours. Brazil is 5 hours behind. And therefore, that is why the president had to go to the summit first quickly to present or to deliver the statement from South Africa and then come back to the hotel. He didn't even go to lunch with the rest of the leaders so that he can get a proper briefing and perhaps getting in touch with different people back home. And therefore, after 3 hours, the statement was issued. It was, we spoke to the president's spokesperson, and then we were promised that the next day on Sunday, the president will then comment before departing to South Africa. And indeed, he did that. That's where I asked him that question. But when you listen to the tone and the words that action should be taken, I expect a stronger statement or announcement. If it doesn't happen, it will be surprising to me in terms of what he said in Brazil. But not only that, yesterday at the funeral of the former deputy president, there's a line I picked up, and that told me that this matter of lawlessness and failure to be disciplined and perhaps to behave in a certain manner as leadership in the country is really bothering him. And I'm told this is not sitting well with him. Let's take a listen at that line. It's a small line, but it says a lot. Let's take a listen.
Do we seek public office because the rewards we think can be reaped by being in public office, or do we take on the mantle of leadership and responsibility so that we may improve the lives of our people? Are we as selfless as we profess to be? Are we builders and unifiers, or do we seek to divide and to break? Now, these questions are easy to ask, but sometimes are difficult to answer. These are not just rhetorical questions. They are in many ways a call for honest reflection. True reflection about selflessness isn't about public declarations.
I mean, certainly, Sophie, just listening to that clip, it just talks about the gravity here, also leveling against the issues around the country's security cluster, when the president is also questioning public office bearers.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying that line to me speaks to, much as he was there to pay homage and tribute and perhaps a send-off to the former deputy president, in his mind, this issue was weighing heavily in his mind. And I'm told that's exactly what's happening. The technicality here is that the Minister of Police is someone who supported the president when he ascended to this position, bringing the KZN vote with some of the comrades of the KZN, his comrades. And therefore, the KZN province is quite important. And therefore, if he ruffles feathers again with someone in KZN, the KZN is quite important in the national vote, but also in the politics of the ANC. So this is a friend, a comrade. He feels disappointed, and he can't believe, perhaps, that these are the allegations leveled against someone that is supposed to hold office in a particular manner at this critical time where the South African population is very, very restless on issues of corruption, lawlessness, poverty, and hunger. And therefore, this matter was weighing heavily on him. And remember, 24 hours, you must now take the nation into confidence where to. And I think he has read the mood by now, having arrived in the country this week earlier. He has read the mood, he's got information, intelligence is whispering in his ears how the nation feel about this current issue. And therefore, I think that's the other issue to take note of. Not that the minister is guilty or not guilty, or Mkwanas is guilty or not guilty, but these issues, they border on public interest and trust in terms of the executive.
And for everyone just joining us, by the way, a very good evening to you. This is extended coverage on the SABC as we build up to an address by President Cyril Ramaphosa tonight, where he will finally speak to the nation about the allegations made by the KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi implicating in wrongdoing the likes of the Police Minister, Senzo Mchunu, and the Deputy National Police Commissioner, Shadrack Sibia. Now, both men have denied any wrongdoing, even with allegations that they were doing the bidding of powerful business people and syndicates, and that the political killings task team, according to Mkhwanazi, was disbanded with the view of shielding people possibly who were involved in all of that. Among those people is Vusumuzi Matlala, a wealthy businessman who scored a lucrative policing contract last year, but that was then overturned after it was found to be flawed procedurally. Matlala, interestingly enough, is currently in custody. He's been arrested to do with an attempted murder case where he, along with other people, are accused of trying to assassinate his former lover. So it's an intricate web. But as we've just been discussing with our politics editor, Mzwandile and our international news editor, Sophie Mokoena, let's bring in Professor Sipho Seepe. Prof, and I want to get your view on just what Mbali and Sophie have been discussing, the political considerations for President Ramaphosa tonight, because it's a security issue, but it's not divorced from those considerations when you consider that in the next year or so, there will be an ANC conference.
Well, the first thing that we must put on the table is that the president took an oath of office to defend and protect the Constitution and also its values. So that is where, when he addresses us today, it will be addressing us as a president
As head of
the
state,
country.
yes.
So from that perspective, he should be guided by the Constitution. But at the same time, the political considerations will come in because the party itself, whenever he was in trouble, they also rallied around him. So you need to have a situation of, if these guys were saying, you have a panel, independent panel of parliament that says, Mr. President, you have a case to answer. And these are senior jurists who says, in all the charges, you are guilty. And the party decided to take a position to say, we are going to protect our president. Now you have ministers who are supporting him politically. The question is, what are you going to do? Are the political considerations going to weigh heavily? Or are you going to say, I've got nothing to lose, this is my second term, and I'm going to make sure that as a president, I take these allegations very seriously. But also, one must understand that at the core of this is that our whole criminal justice system is on trial. If you listen to the allegations, they're not only leveled against Mkhunu as a minister, they are leveled against the correctional services, some top politicians, some judiciary and all that. So obviously, when somebody comes up with such a web of allegations, you need people whose integrity cannot be challenged, who would actually look into these allegations.
But at the same time, then, Prof, pardon me, just before we move on to your next point, does Mkhunu's offer or the expression of a willingness to step aside, because we're not hearing that he will resign, possibly, does that give the president an easy out of what could be a complicated situation politically, precisely because the ANC does protect its own?
Oh, definitely. If the president decides to say, Mr. Mkhunu, I think you have served the country well so far, but these allegations are so heavy, I think you should step aside, not suspension. Because what needs to understand that we must not confuse the ministers and officials. Officials have contract with the state, but the ministers serve at the pleasure of the president. So the president can simply say, now that you offered this, I think it might be better for you to go out and deal with this. But we're not saying you are guilty. We're simply saying your innocence or guilt will be proven after a real commission of inquiry has taken place.
And Mzwandile, back to you at the Union Buildings. Is this the opportunity, perhaps, for President Ramaphosa to consider a wider reshuffle or reset of his cabinet when you consider he's still facing pressure to deal with the allegations against the Higher Education Minister, Nobuhle Ngabane, to do with the appointment of SETA board chairpersons? We're hearing today, according to some reports, that she was already at the airport, checked in to travel internationally, when she was told, actually, return to base.
Well, Tembegile, I think the president could perhaps, in the event the Minister of Police decides to take a step back, I think the president can decide perhaps to do maybe a mini reshuffle or just plug that gap in terms of the position. But what I think he would rather do, if he were to consider a wider cabinet reshuffle, I mean, there is an NEC that is coming up next week. So he would want, I guess, the wisdom of his party to also guide him. Yes, he's the president of state. He can do that. He has the prerogative to do it. But given that he also is the leader of the party, so it makes sense that he may seek the wisdom of the party. Not only that, remember, we are in the GNU arrangement. Perhaps those who may be affected in that setup could also be consulted. So it is possible if, let's say, the Minister of Police decides to ask to be perhaps let go for a moment, perhaps if he wants to then make some rearrangement in that area, perhaps going even further than that. But as I've said, I would think if he then decides to do a wider cabinet reshuffle, perhaps it's something that he can wait maybe a week or weeks or even perhaps a month when he would apply his mind and consult with all his colleagues. But of course, as the head of state, so he has the constitutional responsibility, and then if he feels that that is needed right now, he can go ahead.
And Professor Seepe, I mean, sticking to the point that Mzwandile is making of this cabinet reshuffle, what would a cabinet reshuffle mean for the ANC, particularly when you're focusing on these two ministers, the Minister of Police, who is from KwaZulu-Natal, the Minister of Higher Education, Ngabane, also from KwaZulu-Natal? What would the implications then mean should they then be removed, particularly in a province where the ANC is struggling?
Well, the ANC is not running short of members of parliament who come from KZN. So if that is a consideration, he may choose to remove those and select for making sure that there is actually a balance. But he is in a better position right now, given the mood, given the pressure. If you take the two ministers, both of them have been accused of paging themselves in parliament, where Mkhunu made the statement that, well, I do not know this Brown Mokosi. Later, when he was asked, he says, no, it's my associate. So for parties like the DA, MK party, they've already gone to open charges against the minister. The same applies to Minister of Higher Education. He had made statements that were clearly and incorrect, even though we've seen the party rallying around her, almost suggesting that it was a mistake. But with the mood in the country to say, Mr. President, you came on the ticket of fighting corruption, of making sure that you have a government that has integrity. This is your chance. And one may also assume that he took his time, because normally when something is urgent as this, as he did in the past, when he was in a meeting of Commonwealth, and there was a problem in Mafikeng, he left that and came to deal with it. So I think the last few days, he might have been consulting heavily also with his party to say, when I make this decision, it will be for the good of the country, but also the good for the organization itself.
All right, Professor, let's now take a listen in on another clip from that bombshell of a press briefing we saw last week with major implications for the security cluster.
In 2018, the National Integrated Multidisciplinary Task Team, also known as the Political Killings Task Team, began investigations into political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. Between 2018 and 2024, more than 600 dockets were investigated, which led to 436 arrests and 128 guilty judgments. Mkonazi alleges that the task team was disbanded after they had uncovered syndicates in Gauteng, which allegedly involved senior police officers, politicians, prosecutors and members of the judiciary. He said Deputy Commissioner Shadrack Sibiya ordered the removal of case dockets from investigators, and he blamed Police Minister Senzo Mkhunu for the dissolution of the task team. Mkonazi says in 2024, he received WhatsApp messages on internal police matters from Northwest businessman Brown Mokoena, who he says was an associate of Mkhunu. It emerged in March 2025 that the Independent Police Investigative Directorate was investigating Mkonazi for alleged wrongdoing in the arrest of a correctional service employee. The status of this investigation is unknown. Mkonazi further alleged that cell phone records showed that Mokoena was the middleman between Mkhunu and the alleged criminal kingpin Vusimusi, nicknamed Cat Matlala. Matlala is behind bars, facing charges of attempted murder in Johannesburg. Mkhunu, who earlier denied in Parliament of knowing Mokoena, has since made an about-turn and called Mokoena a comrade. He has denied that he ever communicated with Matlala or received anything from the controversial businessman. Mkonazi's damning claims include messages from Mokoena to Matlala of alleged interference in police investigations by Mkhunu and General Sibiya after police started investigating Matlala. Matlala, who was arrested on the 14th of May, won a 360 million rand police contract in 2024, but it was cancelled in May this year. Further alleging what he calls the orchestrated demise of the task team, Mkonazi listed events which led to murder-accused Katiso Molefe, who was arrested by the task team in Johannesburg, being released on bail. A firearm, allegedly used by Molefe in this murder, was allegedly linked to the attempted murder for which Matlala was charged. Gonazi says it started with investigations by the Investigative Directorate of the National Prosecuting Authority, who took cell phone records in possession of the task team. Gonazi said this led to the arrests on the 25th of June of the project coordinator and crime intelligence boss, Lieutenant General Dumisani Kumalu, and 6 others over an alleged irregular appointment. Gonazi said Molefe was released on bail a day later. Renee Heine, SABC News, Durban.
I mean, also they're looking at, Sophie, some of the, when it comes to the profile of last week and the revelations thereof being made by a police commissioner, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. At the same time, South Africa has been here before, right? And this reminds me of the former police commissioner, Jackie Silebi. Really, this is basically another 2.0 of these serious allegations being leveled against the police cluster.
You are correct. It was 18 years ago in 2007 when there were allegations leveled against the then Commissioner Jackie Silebi. Even during that time, I think the Minister of Police at that time, Charles Ngakula, was not convinced. You'd recall that he even made a call that those who have made those allegations must put evidence or must bring evidence. Now, the problem here was that later, in court, he was found guilty. And I know at that time, because I covered that story, that at that time, the minister, of course, he thought there was nothing. And the issue there was that there was a strong position taken by the Mbeje administration to crack down on syndicates, particularly the drug lords. And they thought that process was process of infiltrating these drug lords and these syndicates and big criminals so that you can deal with it. Little did they know that perhaps the criminals, because they are clever, they know what to do. They were able to capture certain grounds in terms of using the very same police. And then in court, the evidence that was led there was quite worrying in terms of the police. And therefore, the issue here is, I think the president will announce a process or a committee or a commission to investigate this. So it will be interesting to see what's likely going to come out, because I think he is also taken aback with all this information when you have someone that you trusted and many people trusted, knew him as a former Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, a man who would recall he was removed unceremoniously, put under pressure because he didn't want to do certain things in KZN, and all of a sudden there's this serious issue to deal with. So we've been here before, but I think if the president has gone back to look at the Silebi matter, he would have arrived at a satisfactory answer in terms of also taking into consideration, as the prophets indicated, that you have to use the constitution and the law to arrive at a particular decision, because you are a head of state, you are guided by the constitution and the laws of the country. And I think that's what's gonna happen. He is going to look at the constitution and the laws of the country, so it will be a process. And I think if he has gone back to look at this labor matter, 1 or 2 issues might help him.
SABC News Politics editor Mzwandile Mbeje, just still outside the Union buildings for us. Mzwai, we're now about 25 minutes away from the scheduled address by President Ramaphosa. And I think it's worth reflecting then at this time on how big a test this will be for this term of government. Yes, there have been multiple issues with the GNU, but as far as crises go, how big a moment or a test will this be for Ramaphosa as head of state and as a politician with links to the governing ANC?
Well, it is indeed a big test. I mean, since Sunday last week, this issue has completely dominated what has been happening in the country. And I think the president will have that in mind to say, I need to take a decision. And perhaps that decision may not necessarily satisfy everyone. But the fact of the matter, as long as it is communicated, why it's communicated, why a particular decision was taken. So, and I think people of South Africa will be quite understanding, as much as they want some sort of action one way or the other, so they do know that some sort of processes need to be followed. So this is a big moment, and I think this is a big test for the president. So when he gets onto the podium at 7 o'clock, as we expect it will happen, so that is what he needs to do. Perhaps a quick update as well. I have just been interacting with some of the staff here. It does appear that we are still on track in terms of time. We have seen the arrival of the Director General in the presidency, Ms. Phindile Baleni, so that clearly shows you that it's possible that everything is on track. So if then that happens the way we expect it, so at 7 o'clock, the president will definitely speak to the nation.
All right. Thank you so much, Mzwai. That's SABC News politics editor there, Mzwandile Mbeje, who will continue to give us rolling coverage from the union buildings. And we are just moments away from seeing President Cyril Ramaphosa address the nation. And that follows that bombshell of a press briefing in which we saw just last week with KZN Police Commissioner Mokoena laying to the fore some of the allegations within the country's security cluster. Let's now gonna let go of our two guests in studio, and we'll catch up with them a bit more later.